There's a strange phenomenon I've noticed on several television reports from the early 1960s onward. There may be more, but since I got my first television in 1962, I can't say for sure. I would like to post this here to ask if anybody else has noticed or seen any others. It started in the early 1960s, specifically the Kennedy assassination. I was watching a broadcast by ABC of his final procession, and while the reporter was talking to the camera amongst the crowd, I noticed something quite odd. A very scruffily dressed man standing quite a distance behind the reporter was staring right into the camera. He wore the typical attire of a homeless person: dirty brown trench coat, a dark green woolen hat, and noticeably long facial hair. That's not what creeped me out, though. There were a massive amount of people around, and I just assumed this homeless man was here to watch the parade. The fact that he was staring dead on at the camera motionless was quite off-putting, though. A little while into the report, he finally moved. He raised his arm in front of himself and put his hand up, giving the number 5 with his fingers. A few seconds after he did this, there was a loud bang and a massive commotion in the crowd. The man stayed absolutely still with his hand still outstretched, but the reporter and the cameraman moved to get a better look at what had happened, and the man was no longer in the shot. Kennedy had been killed. Some years went by, and along the way, I seemed to have forgotten about the strange homeless man from the Kennedy report. That was until 1980. I had returned home from work, and I was absolutely shattered. My wife was laying out dinner, and I was busy catching up on the news on TV. I changed to a particularly interesting report about a heat wave that was currently affecting some of the southeast. This concerned me as my wife and I had relatives there, and we had both feared for their well-being. The news reporter was billing this as the worst American heat wave in decades. At that point, I noticed him again. In the distance, over the reporter's left shoulder, was the homeless man from the Kennedy report. I didn't notice him at first, and it was his initial movement that drew my eyes to him. As the reporter spoke, the homeless man lifted his hand once again and signaled the number 4 with his fingers. I was more alarmed at the fact that the man seemed exactly the same as when I had spotted him in the Kennedy report almost 20 years before. He was dressed exactly the same, still wearing his trench coat, despite the reporter claiming that the heat wave was totally unbearable. He himself had removed his suit jacket and had rolled up his shirt sleeves due to the heat. That man had made a couple more appearances in the news over the years that I know of. The next one was in 2001 during a report on the terrorist attacks at the World Trade Center, where he held up 3 fingers. And more recently during the reports of the devastation that Hurricane Sandy caused in New York, where he held up 2. Each time in all 4 of these news reports, he had been dressed exactly the same, and he'd shown no sign of emotion whatsoever. The people around him seemed to pay no mind to him, and each time he just stares directly into the camera lens until the report ends, or until the cameraman had moved the camera away from him. I've written this down because of his appearance in the Sandy reports. It's now 2017, and I know for a fact that DVD recording and such have become a lot more common. I've never owned a major recording device such as a VCR or a DVD recorder myself, and so I haven't been able to capture the man in any reports. Other people may have, though, so I urge you to flick back through any recordings of the news reports you may have, and try to screen grab any image of the man, if possible, so that we may identify him, and find out exactly why he's showing up at these events. Right now, I'm very scared, though, and I think it's plausible that you should be, too. It's obvious at this point that this man does not age, and appears in news reports of disasters both natural and man-made. Not to mention, with the exception of the Kennedy assassination, many people have been injured and killed in said disasters. And it's getting worse. It's also obvious that this man is counting down to something in each of these reports that he's appeared in. The most troubling of all, He's down to number 1.